I'm Brandon Wilson, 29 years old, and growing up as the responsible twin was never easy. While Jessica got away with everything, I was the one who always played by the rules. But nothing prepared me for the day I discovered my parents had emptied my wedding fund for my sister's extravagant celebration. That betrayal led me to cut them off completely. Now, after 2 years of silence, they're suddenly at my doorstep, desperate for my help. Before I tell you how my parents betrayed me, and what happened when they came crawling back, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal that will make your blood boil. Growing up as the responsible twin shaped my entire identity. From the moment Jessica and I could walk and talk, the differences in how our parents treated us became painfully obvious. While Jessica could break a vase playing indoors and get comforted for her tears, I would be lectured about being more careful when I tried to clean up her mess. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. Our birthday parties told the complete story of our family dynamic. For our 10th birthday, Jessica got a massive celebration with a bouncy castle professional entertainer and custom cake. My celebration the following weekend was a simple backyard gathering with just a few friends. When I asked why the difference, my mother simply said, "Jessica just has more friends, honey. We need to accommodate them all." But I noticed even the quality of decorations and party favors differed significantly. School achievements followed the same pattern. When I brought home straight, as my parents would nod approvingly and say, "That's what we expect from you, Brandon." But when Jessica managed to pull a B- average, they celebrated with ice cream and presents for her tremendous improvement. I still remember the sting of watching her get rewarded for doing the bare minimum, while my consistent excellence was treated as nothing special. Christmas mornings were particularly revealing. One year when we were 14, I unwrapped practical gifts, new school supplies, clothes, and a scientific calculator for my advanced math class. Jessica, meanwhile, received a new smartphone, designer clothes, and concert tickets. When I quietly asked about the disparity, my father said, "You're just more practical, Brandon. Jessica needs a little extra encouragement to stay motivated." My Aunt Linda was the only one who noticed and acknowledged the unfair treatment. She was my father's sister and would visit several times a year from Chicago. After one particularly obvious instance of favoritism when we were 15, she pulled me aside. "Brandon, I see what's happening here," she said quietly while we sat on the porch swing. "It's not right, and it's not your fault." Those simple words of validation meant everything to me. Aunt Linda became my sanctuary in the storm of favoritism. She sent me books called regularly and treated me with the respect I craved from my parents. By 16, I had started working part-time at a local grocery store. My parents seemed surprised when I didn't ask them for spending money anymore. Brandon's becoming so independent, they would tell relatives proudly, completely missing that my independence was born from necessity rather than choice. I started saving religiously, setting aside 60% of every paycheck in a personal account. Jessica, meanwhile, received a regular allowance that was 3 times what I earned in a week, with no expectation that she work or save. When college applications rolled around, I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote dozens of essays, maintained perfect grades, and built an impressive list of extracurricular activities. The result, a nearly full scholarship to State University for Business Administration. My parents' response, "Well, that saves us some money." They seemed more relieved than proud. Jessica, on the other hand, barely made it into a private college, with her mediocre grades and thin resume. My parents paid her full tuition, housing in the expensive dorms, and gave her a generous monthly stipend. Meanwhile, I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to cover my remaining expenses and lived in the cheapest housing I could find. During those college years, I watched from afar as Jessica's social media filled with party photos, spring break trips, and shopping sprees. I was eating ramen and pulling all-nighters to maintain my scholarship while working. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Despite everything, I maintained contact with my family. Sunday phone calls home became ritual, though conversations were superficial. My mother would spend 10 minutes asking about my classes before launching into 20 minutes of Jessica's latest adventures. I learned to keep my true feelings hidden, to nod and smile during holiday gatherings, and to lower my expectations for any form of recognition. By graduation, I had a job lined up at Reynolds Financial Group in the city. I graduated summa cum laude. My parents attended the ceremony, but left early to help Jessica move into her new apartment, which they were subsidizing despite her lack of steady employment. I drove myself home alone afterward. As I established my career, the emotional distance between my family and me grew naturally. I visited on major holidays, sent appropriate birthday and Christmas gifts, and maintained the appearance of a relationship, but inside, I was pulling away, building my own life, where I could be valued for who I was, rather than compared to my twin. That strategy served me well until I met Rachel, and suddenly found myself hoping against all evidence and experience that my parents might finally see me. I met Rachel Bennett during a company charity event 3 years after I started at Reynolds Financial. Our firm was organizing a fundraiser for a local children's hospital, and Rachel was the event coordinator assigned by the hospital foundation. From the moment she walked into our planning meeting with her organized binder and confident smile, I was captivated. "So, Brandon Wilson," she said, reading my name tag at the refreshment table afterward. "Your sponsorship proposal was incredibly detailed. I'm impressed." "Thanks," I replied, trying not to spill my coffee. "I like to be thorough." I noticed she smiled. Most corporate sponsors just throw money at us without understanding the details. You actually seem to care about where it goes. That first conversation lasted 45 minutes, and by the end, I had her number and a dinner date for the following Friday. Our relationship progressed naturally and easily, something I wasn't used to after my complicated family dynamics. Rachel was straightforward, honest, and genuinely interested in me. She came from a close-knit family with parents who had been married for 35 years and a younger brother in medical school. 6 months into dating, Rachel invited me to her parents' home for dinner. Michael and Patricia Bennett welcomed me warmly, asking thoughtful questions about my work and interests. When Rachel mentioned my recent promotion, they toasted me with genuine enthusiasm. The contrast to my own family dinners was jarring. "Your parents seem so." Normal, Rachel suggested with a laugh on the drive home. "Interested," I corrected. "In you, in me, in everything. They really listen." Rachel squeezed my hand. "That's what families are supposed to do, Brandon." After 18 months together, I knew Rachel was the one. I planned a proposal at the Botanical Garden, where we'd had our third date, arranging for a photographer to capture the moment when I got down on one knee beside the koi pond. Rachel's tearful yes, and the celebration dinner afterward with her family, remains one of my happiest memories. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was predictably lukewarm. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, her tone suggesting she was multitasking during our call. "Have you set a date yet?" "Not yet, Mom. We just got engaged yesterday." "Well, don't wait too long. Good venues book up fast." "Oh, did I tell you Jessica got a promotion at her job? She's taking us out to celebrate this weekend." The conversation quickly shifted to Jessica's accomplishments, and my engagement became a footnote. A week later, Rachel and I visited my parents to introduce her properly. During dinner, I cautiously brought up the wedding fund my parents had mentioned throughout my childhood. "So about the wedding," I began. "I remember you and Dad talking about the savings account you started for Jessica and me when we were born, for our future weddings." My father nodded, swirling his wine. "Yes, we did set something aside. Not a fortune, but it should help with the basics." "That's very generous," Rachel said warmly. "My parents are also offering to help, but every bit makes a difference with wedding costs these days." "Well, we'll need to look at the accounts and see where things stand," my mother said vaguely. "The market hasn't been great lately." I noticed the quick glance between my parents, but didn't think much of it at the time. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I began preliminary wedding planning. We researched venues, photographers, and caterers. The numbers added up quickly, and while we both had good jobs, we also had student loans and were saving for a house down payment. We met with Rachel's parents, who generously offered to cover the rehearsal dinner and contribute $10,000 toward the reception. "We've been saving since Rachel was little," Patricia explained. "We want your day to be special." "And we don't believe in starting a marriage with wedding debt," Michael added practically. Their generosity moved me deeply. For the first time, I felt hopeful that planning our wedding might actually bring my family closer. Perhaps seeing Rachel's parents' enthusiasm would inspire mine to show more interest. I scheduled a meeting with my parents specifically to discuss wedding plans and finances. Rachel and I arrived with a preliminary budget and timeline for a wedding about a year away. "We're thinking next June," I explained, showing them our spreadsheet. "We've found a few venues in our price range." My mother glanced at the paper briefly. "June is so hot. Have you considered October? The foliage would be beautiful." "Actually, Mom, June works better with our work schedules and the honeymoon timing." "Well, you know best," she said dismissively. "Oh, before I forget, Jessica called earlier. She's been seeing someone new. His name is Nathan Campbell, and he's in real estate development. Very successful." And just like that, the conversation shifted to Jessica's new relationship. My wedding plans were shelved for stories about Nathan's luxury condo and recent trip to Europe. 3 months later, just as Rachel and I put a deposit on our venue, Jessica announced her engagement to Nathan after dating him for only 6 months. My parents' reaction was immediate and overwhelming. "We're so thrilled," my mother gushed during our weekly call. "Nathan proposed at sunset on a yacht he chartered. The ring is absolutely stunning, 3 carats at least." "That's fast," I observed cautiously. "They haven't been together very long." "When you know," my father chimed in from the extension. "They want to get married quickly this summer. They found the perfect venue, that new luxury hotel downtown." "This summer," I repeated. "That's only 4 months away, and it's before our wedding." "Well, the hotel had a cancellation, so they got a fantastic rate," my mother explained. Though the idea of anything at that hotel being affordable seemed dubious. Sometimes things just fall into place perfectly. Over the next few weeks, my parents became completely absorbed in Jessica's wedding plans. Our Sunday calls were now entirely about her venue, her dress fittings, her elaborate flower arrangements. When I tried to discuss details of my own wedding, they would listen distractedly before returning to the topic of Jessica's rapidly approaching celebration. Rachel noticed their disinterest immediately. "They seem very focused on Jessica's wedding," she observed kindly, after one particularly frustrating phone call. "They always are focused on Jessica," I replied, the old familiar hurt resurfacing. "I just hoped our wedding might be different." I had no idea just how different it would be, but not in the way I had hoped. The betrayal happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I had been trying to reach my parents for 3 days to confirm whether they'd had a chance to look into the wedding fund. Rachel and I were finalizing contracts with vendors and needed to know our complete budget. When my father finally answered, he sounded distracted. "Brandon, can I call you back? We're at a tasting for Jessica's reception menu." "Dad, I really need to know about the wedding fund. We have to put down deposits, and I need to know what we're working with." There was a pause then. My father cleared his throat. "Right about that. Your mother and I have been meaning to talk to you." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. I sat down at my kitchen table. "What about it, Dad?" "Well, son, the thing is, we had to use those funds for Jessica's wedding. It's happening so soon, and the costs have added up faster than we anticipated." The words didn't register immediately. "What do you mean you used those funds, the entire wedding fund? Mine too." "Now, Brandon," my father's voice took on that patronizing tone I knew too well. "You have to understand. Jessica's wedding is in 8 weeks. Yours isn't until next year. You have time to save. Jessica needed the money now. But that money was specifically set aside for my wedding too," I said, my voice rising. "You've been telling us about those accounts since we were kids." "Don't raise your voice," he replied sharply. "Jessica's venue alone cost $25,000. The flowers are imported. The photographer is booked for the entire weekend. These expenses came up suddenly. And you didn't think to discuss this with me. Before emptying my wedding fund, I was standing now pacing my apartment. Brandon, you and Rachel both have good jobs. Jessica and Nathan are just starting out." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Starting out, Dad, Nathan drives a Porsche and just bought a penthouse. Jessica works part-time at a boutique because she needs flexibility. They're hardly struggling. That's not the point. The point is, Jessica's wedding is happening first, and she needs the money now. We'll help with your wedding when the time comes. How you just spent my fund and apparently yours too. We'll figure something out, he said vaguely. Look, I need to go. The chef is waiting for us to taste the main course options. After he hung up, I sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour. When Rachel came home from work, she found me still at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Brandon, what's wrong? When I told her what happened, her face flushed with anger on my behalf. They can't do that. That money was yours. Apparently they can, and did I, replied, feeling hollow. They didn't even hesitate or apologize. Rachel sat beside me and took my hands. What do they expect us to do now? Save more, apparently. Or scale back our plans. The unfairness of it all was starting to sink in. Jessica gets a luxury hotel wedding with imported flowers, and we're supposed to be grateful if we can afford the community center. The next day, I called my mother hoping for some explanation or apology. Instead, she doubled down. Brandon, I don't understand why you're making such a fuss. We raised you to be responsible with money. You've always been the practical one. Jessica needs more help with these things. Mom, you took money that was specifically saved for my wedding and gave it to Jessica. How is that fair? Life isn't fair, Brandon, she replied curtly. Jessica's wedding is costing far more than we anticipated. The videographer alone is $8,000. The details of Jessica's lavish wedding plans only twisted the knife deeper. When I tried to explain how hurt I was, my mother dismissed my feelings entirely. You've always been jealous of your sister, she said. I thought you'd outgrown that by now. That night, Rachel and I had a serious conversation about our options. Our wedding was planned for 300 guests at a beautiful converted barn venue. We had dreamed of good food, live music, and a photographer to capture it all. Without the money we had counted on, we would need to scale back significantly or postpone. We could push it back another year, Rachel suggested, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. No, I said firmly. We're not putting our lives on hold because my parents decided Jessica's wedding was more important than ours. We revised our budget, cutting our guest list to 150, choosing a Sunday date for the lower rate, and scaling back on several elements we had looked forward to. Rachel's parents, upon hearing what happened, immediately offered to increase their contribution. Absolutely not, I told them when they made the offer. You've already been incredibly generous. This isn't your problem to solve. It's not a problem, Brandon Michael insisted. It's our daughter's wedding, too. I appreciate that more than I can say, I replied, but I need to handle this my way. The next few weeks were tense. Jessica called once ostensibly to ask about my wedding plans, but really to talk about hers. Nathan and I decided on a 7-tier cake, she gushed. And I'm having 10 bridesmaids. The dresses are being custom made. When I remained silent, she finally asked, Is something wrong? Did you know Mom and Dad gave you my wedding fund? I asked directly. Oh, that she dismissed with a laugh. They mentioned something about moving some money around. But Brandon, you know how important this wedding is for me. Nathan's family is very well connected. Everything has to be perfect. And my wedding doesn't matter. Don't be so dramatic. Your wedding isn't even for another year. I'm sure Mom and Dad will figure something out by then. Her complete lack of concern or appreciation confirmed what I had always known in my family's eyes. Jessica's wants would always outweigh my needs. The final straw came when my parents called to check in a week later. After briefly asking about our revised wedding plans, they launched into a detailed description of Jessica's bridal shower, which they were hosting at an upscale restaurant. We've ordered personalized champagne bottles as favors, my mother said excitedly. And wait until you see the cake. It's shaped like a wedding dress. I ended the call early, claiming a work emergency. That night I broke down. Years of accumulated hurt, dismissal, and unfair treatment came pouring out. Rachel held me as I finally acknowledged the painful truth: my parents would never value me the way they valued Jessica. I think I need to distance myself from them, I told Rachel as we lay in bed that night. At least until after the wedding. I can't keep putting myself through this. I support whatever you need to do, she whispered, stroking my hair. But let's talk to someone first. This is a big decision. The next day I called my Aunt Linda, who had always seen the dynamic clearly. "I'm not surprised," she said after I explained what happened. "But I am deeply disappointed in my brother and sister-in-law." "Am I overreacting?" I asked her. "Brandon, they took money specifically saved for your future and gave it to your sister without discussion or apology. That's not parenting, that's favoritism, and it's wrong." Her validation gave me the strength to continue planning our scaled-back wedding without my parents' support, but the wound of their betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. 3 weeks before Jessica's wedding, an elaborate invitation arrived at our apartment. The heavyweight cream cardstock came in a box with fresh rose petals and a small bottle of champagne. The invitation itself was letter pressed in gold foil announcing the union of Jessica Wilson and Nathan Campbell at the Grand Imperial Hotel, with a black tie reception to follow. A handwritten note from Jessica was tucked inside. "Can't wait for you to see how amazing everything will be. Hope you can make it work." The casual reference to making it work after they had literally taken my wedding fund to finance their extravagance made my blood boil. I dropped the invitation on the counter and walked away. "Are we going?" Rachel asked that evening. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to skip it entirely." "What would that accomplish?" she asked gently. "It would show them they can't treat me like this and expect everything to be normal." Rachel sat beside me on the couch. "I understand that feeling, but will skipping your sister's wedding make you feel better in the long run?" I called my best friend Tyler for advice. We'd been friends since college, and he knew all about my family situation. "Dude, I wouldn't blame you if you blew it off," he said. "What they did was seriously messed up. But it's your sister's wedding. Not going is the nuclear option. You can't take it back." After much deliberation, Rachel and I decided to attend. We would go to the ceremony and reception, be civil, and leave early. I wouldn't make a scene at Jessica's wedding, but I also wouldn't pretend everything was fine. The day of the wedding arrived, a perfect June Saturday. The Grand Imperial Hotel was the most exclusive venue in the city, with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and a grand ballroom that could accommodate 500 guests. As Rachel and I entered, I couldn't help calculating the cost of everything I saw. The ceremony space featured an elevated platform with a custom-built floral arch that must have cost thousands. Each row of chairs had elaborate flower arrangements tied with silk ribbons. A string quartet played softly as guests were seated. My parents greeted us briefly in the lobby. My mother looked stunning in an obviously new designer dress, while my father wore a tuxedo that I suspected had been purchased rather than rented. "Brandon, Rachel, so glad you could make it, my mother," said, air kissing our cheeks. "We're about to start the family photos. Brandon, come with me." I participated robotically in the photos, smiling when directed, standing where positioned. Jessica looked radiant in a custom gown that featured hand-sewn crystals and a cathedral-length train. I overheard the photographer mention that they had been flown in from New York specifically for the wedding. During the ceremony, I watched my parents beam with pride as they walked Jessica down the aisle. The officiant spoke about the couple's whirlwind romance and destined meeting. I felt Rachel squeeze my hand supportively throughout. The reception that followed was even more extravagant than the ceremony. The cocktail hour featured ice sculptures, a raw bar, and servers circulating with trays of expensive champagne. The ballroom had been transformed with ceiling installations of crystal and flowers, custom lighting and table settings that included gold-rimmed china and personalized menu cards. Rachel and I were seated at a table far from the main wedding party with distant cousins and Jessica's former co-workers. I noticed my Aunt Linda had been similarly relegated to a back table. "This is quite the production," Linda said when she stopped by our table. "I guess we know where your wedding fund went." Dinner was a 5-course meal with wine pairings. As I picked at my lobster tail, I overheard my father talking loudly at a nearby table. "We spared no expense," he was saying proudly. "Jessica deserves the very best, and we made sure she got it." The comment might have been innocuous if I hadn't known the truth that they had taken my wedding fund to finance this extravaganza. The breaking point came during the toasts. My father stood champagne in hand and tapped his glass for attention. "From the day Jessica was born," he began, "we knew she was special. She has always been our shining star, lighting up every room she enters." He continued detailing Jessica's accomplishments and qualities while I sat invisible as always. And now she's found Nathan, a man worthy of her brightness. We couldn't be prouder of our beautiful daughter today. We've given her everything we possibly could to make this day perfect because nothing is too good for our princess. The crowd applauded as my father raised his glass. To Jessica and Nathan, I set my napkin on the table and stood quietly. Rachel looked at me questioningly. "I need some air," I whispered. Outside in the hotel garden, I finally let myself feel the full weight of the injustice. My parents hadn't just taken my money, they had once again made it abundantly clear where their priorities lay. I would always be an afterthought. Rachel found me sitting on a stone bench near a fountain. "Are you okay?" she asked, though we both knew the answer. "I can't do this anymore," I said quietly. "I can't keep pretending that it doesn't hurt when they treat me like I don't matter." "I know," she said, sitting beside me. "I think I need to cut contact with them, at least for a while. I need to focus on us, on our future, without this constant reminder that I'll never be good enough." Rachel nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But let's not make any permanent decisions tonight." We returned to the reception long enough to say brief goodbyes, claiming an early morning commitment the next day. Jessica barely noticed our departure, surrounded by her adoring guests and basking in the attention. The next morning I called my parents. My mother answered, sounding tired but happy. "Jessica's wedding was absolutely perfect," she said before I could speak. "Everyone said it was the most beautiful wedding they'd ever attended." "I'm glad it was worth it," I replied, my voice steady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking and I've made a decision." "What's that, honey?" "I need to take a step back from our relationship. I need some space." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you and Dad took money specifically saved for my wedding and gave it to Jessica without even discussing it with me. I'm talking about a lifetime of being treated as less important, less special, less deserving. Brandon, you're being ridiculous. We've always treated you and Jessica equally." Her denial was the final confirmation I needed. "No, Mom, you haven't. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge that shows me that nothing will ever change." "So what are you saying? You're going to punish us because we helped your sister have a nice wedding." "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. I won't be calling or visiting for a while. I need to focus on my own life, my relationship with Rachel, and our wedding, which will happen without your financial support, or apparently your emotional support." "You can't be serious," she gasped. "I've never been more serious. Please respect my decision." After I hung up, my phone immediately began ringing with calls from my father, then Jessica. I sent them both to voicemail. Jessica left an angry message accusing me of trying to ruin her special day out of jealousy. My father's message was a lecture about family obligation and my selfishness. I blocked their numbers that afternoon. I also blocked them on social media and asked Rachel to do the same. It was a drastic step, but I knew that if I left any avenue open, they would use it to pressure me without addressing the real issues. That evening I felt both grief and relief. I was mourning the family relationship I had always wanted but never had, while simultaneously freeing myself from the constant disappointment of hoping for change that would never come. Rachel and I were married 4 months later, in a ceremony that looked nothing like what we had originally planned but felt perfect nonetheless. We scaled back from the converted barn to a small art gallery owned by one of Rachel's colleagues. Instead of 300 guests, we invited 70 people who truly cared about us. Rachel's parents hosted the rehearsal dinner at their home, cooking their famous lasagna and garlic bread. On our wedding morning, I received a small package from Aunt Linda. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note: "This won't replace what was taken from you, but I want you to know that someone in the family values your happiness. Love always, Aunt Linda." Her generosity brought tears to my eyes. We used the money to hire a talented local photographer, something we had reluctantly cut from our budget. The ceremony itself was intimate and personal. Rachel looked stunning in a simple gown she found at a boutique rather than a bridal salon. We wrote our own vows, promising to always see and value each other. As we exchanged rings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. This was my real family now, the one I was choosing. Rachel's father gave a heartfelt toast at the reception, welcoming me to their family with genuine warmth. From the moment we met Brandon, he said, raising his glass, we knew he was special. His integrity, his kindness, and his devotion to our daughter have made him already a beloved son to us. The words "we knew he was special" echoed in my mind, so similar to what my father had said about Jessica, yet so different in meaning. Here was a family that saw me, valued me without comparison or condition. After a weekend honeymoon at a nearby lake resort, all we could afford after the financial hit, Rachel and I returned to our apartment and began building our life together. We both threw ourselves into our careers, working hard and saving diligently. 13 months after cutting contact with my parents, I received a significant promotion at Reynolds Financial. Marcus Reynolds, the founder and CEO, called me into his office personally to deliver the news. "Brandon, your work on the Westfield account was exceptional," he said. "We're promoting you to senior financial advisor with a team of your own." The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and a larger office. Rachel surprised me with a celebratory dinner at home, complete with champagne and my favorite meal. "I'm so proud of you," she said, raising her glass. "You've accomplished this on your own merit with no help or connections." 6 months later, we had saved enough for a down payment on a small 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours, and we spent weekends painting walls and planting a garden, making it truly our home. During this time, my parents made occasional attempts to re-establish contact. There were voicemails from unknown numbers that I recognized as their voices. Christmas and birthday cards arrived, addressed in my mother's distinctive handwriting. I returned them unopened. Twice they appeared at our apartment building, but we had already moved. Aunt Linda kept me updated on family matters, respecting my boundaries, while ensuring I wasn't completely in the dark. "Your parents talk about you often," she told me during one of our monthly phone calls. "They show your old photos to friends and brag about your job in finance. But they still don't acknowledge what they did wrong." "No," she admitted. "They say you're being stubborn and holding a grudge. Jessica and Nathan bought a bigger house, by the way. Your parents co-signed the mortgage." I wasn't surprised. The pattern continued even in my absence. 18 months after our wedding, Rachel shared life-changing news. She was pregnant. We celebrated quietly, treasuring this new chapter between just the two of us, before sharing the news with her family. Patricia and Michael were ecstatic about becoming grandparents and immediately began planning a nursery at their house for when the baby visited. As Rachel's pregnancy progressed, we had serious conversations about parenting and family dynamics. "I want our child to always feel valued for who they are," I said, as we assembled the crib in what would become the nursery, "not for what they achieve or how they compare to others." "They will," Rachel assured me. "We'll make sure of it. And if we have more children someday, I want them all to know they're equally loved." Rachel paused, crib instruction manual in hand. "You know, most parents don't have to consciously think about treating their children equally. They just do." "My parents didn't," I replied. "I need to be conscious of it to break that cycle." As we prepared for our baby's arrival, I found myself reflecting on my family of origin more frequently. There were moments when I wondered if I should reach out, if having a grandchild might change the dynamic. But each time I remembered the pattern of behavior that had led to my decision to cut contact. Rachel's parents became our extended family, dropping by with home-cooked meals and baby supplies. Tyler and his wife became regular dinner guests, and my colleague Allison from work became a close friend to both of us. We built a chosen family of people who respected and valued us. Our son Michael, named after Rachel's father, was born in spring. Holding him for the first time, I made a silent promise to always see him for exactly who he was, to celebrate his uniqueness without comparison. For 2 years we lived in peaceful happiness. Michael grew from a newborn to a toddler with Rachel's blue eyes and my curly hair. I received another promotion. Rachel returned to work part-time, finding a balance that worked for our family. The birthday cards from my parents continued to arrive and continued to be returned. Once Jessica sent a baby gift when Michael was born, but there was no note, no acknowledgement of her role in the family rift. I donated the expensive outfit to a women's shelter. During those 2 years I healed. The sharp pain of betrayal gradually dulled to a distant ache. I no longer felt angry when I thought about my parents and Jessica. I felt nothing at all. I had accepted that the family I had been born into was not the family I needed, and I had created that family for myself instead. Then, on an ordinary Sunday afternoon, as Rachel and I played with Michael in our small backyard, the doorbell rang. I opened the front door to find my parents standing on the porch looking almost unrecognizable. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and he had lost weight, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. My mother looked older than her, years with deep lines around her eyes and mouth. Both appeared nervous, a state I had rarely seen them in. "Brandon," my mother said, her voice catching, "please can we talk?" My first instinct was to close the door. 2 years of silence had served me well, but something in their appearance gave me pause. "Now isn't a good time," I said coldly. "Please, son," my father said, a note of desperation in his voice I'd never heard before. "We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." Rachel appeared behind me, Michael on her hip. Despite everything they had done, she had always been more forgiving than me. "Why don't we hear what they have to say?" she suggested quietly. "You don't have to decide anything right now." I stepped back reluctantly, allowing them into our home. They entered cautiously like visitors in a foreign country. "You have a beautiful home," my mother offered, looking around at our modest living room with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in family photos and Michael's framed artwork. "Thank you," Rachel replied when I remained silent. "Would you like some coffee?" While Rachel prepared coffee in the kitchen, an awkward silence fell over the living room. My parents kept glancing at Michael, who was now playing with blocks on the floor, obviously trying to reconcile the toddler before them with the infant they had never met. "He looks like you did at that age," my mother finally said. "Why are you here?" I asked, directly ignoring her attempt at connection. My parents exchanged glances before my father cleared his throat. "We're in trouble, Brandon. Serious financial trouble." This was not what I had expected. "What kind of trouble?" "We're losing the house," my mother said, her voice breaking. "The bank is foreclosing." "How is that possible?" I asked, genuinely surprised. My parents had always been financially comfortable, if not wealthy. My father looked down at his hands. "It started with Jessica and Nathan's business venture. They wanted to open a high-end real estate firm catering to luxury properties. They needed startup capital." "Let me guess," I said bitterly. "You gave them money." "We invested," my father corrected. It seemed like a sure thing. Nathan had connections, Jessica had charm. They found a premium office space downtown, hired staff, created beautiful marketing materials. But I prompted. "But it failed," my mother said simply. "Nathan's connections didn't materialize. The luxury market slowed down. They had no experience running a business." "We lost our entire investment," my father continued. $350,000. The number was staggering. "That's more than your house is worth," I said, doing quick mental math. "We took out a second mortgage," my father admitted. "And when Jessica and Nathan couldn't make their office lease payments, we co-signed for that too." Rachel returned with coffee, catching the last part of the conversation. "What happened to Nathan's money? Wasn't he successful in real estate before?" My parents exchanged another look. Apparently, my mother said carefully, Nathan had been exaggerating his success. His Porsche was leased, his condo was mortgaged to the hilt, and most of his connections were people he'd met at country clubs where he wasn't actually a member. Jessica didn't know I asked, though I suspected the answer. "She claims she didn't," my father replied, "though she certainly enjoyed the lifestyle." I took a sip of coffee, processing this information. "So what does any of this have to do with me?" "We need help," my mother said simply. "We have nowhere else to turn." "What about Jessica and Nathan?" "They filed for bankruptcy last month," my father explained. "They're living in a rented apartment now. There's nothing they can do for us." The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they had consistently favored, whose wedding they had funded with my money, was now unable to help them in their time of need. "What exactly are you asking for?" I asked bluntly. "A loan," my father said. "Just enough to stop the foreclosure and give us time to sell the house ourselves. We can downsize, start over, but we need to avoid foreclosure or we'll get nothing from the sale." Rachel touched my arm gently. "Brandon, why don't we talk privately for a minute?" In our bedroom, Rachel closed the door and turned to me. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking this is karma," I admitted. "They took my wedding fund for Jessica's extravagant wedding to a man who turned out to be a fraud, and now they're losing everything. Is that how you want to look at this? As karmic justice?" I sighed, sitting on the edge of our bed. But I don't know if I can just write them a check after everything they've done." "You don't have to decide that right now," Rachel said. "But think about what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to be someone who turns away family in need, even if they've hurt you? Or do you want to be better than that?" "They never apologized," I pointed out. "They still don't even acknowledge what they did wrong." "Then maybe that's where this needs to start." When we returned to the living room, my parents were awkwardly watching Michael play. He had offered my mother a block, a small gesture of trust from a child who had no idea of the complicated history in the room. "Before we discuss any financial help," I said firmly, "we need to address the reason I cut contact in the first place." My parents shifted uncomfortably. "Brandon, that was a long time ago," my mother began. "2 years isn't that long," I replied. "And nothing has changed if you still can't acknowledge what you did." "What do you want us to say?" my father asked defensively. "That we helped your sister with her wedding. We're her parents, too." "You didn't help her," I corrected. "You took money specifically saved for my wedding and gave it all to Jessica without even discussing it with me. Then you dismissed my feelings when I tried to tell you how hurt I was." My mother looked away. "We did what we thought was best at the time." "And do you still think it was best? Now that Jessica and Nathan's marriage is struggling under bankruptcy? Now that the extravagant wedding you financed is just a memory while you're losing your house?" My directness seemed to break through something. My father's shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "No," he admitted quietly. "We made a mistake, a serious one." "We've made many mistakes," my mother added, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "With both of you." It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was a start. As Michael toddled over to me for a hug, I felt some of my anger begin to soften. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "I can't give you an answer today." "We understand," my father replied, though the worry in his eyes was clear. "The foreclosure proceedings begin next week." After they left, Rachel and I put Michael down for his nap and sat at our kitchen table discussing the situation. "They're still not taking full responsibility," I noted. "They acknowledged a mistake, but not the pattern of favoritism that's existed our entire lives." "True," Rachel agreed. "But they're at least admitting they were wrong about the wedding fund. That's something." I thought about what it would mean to help them financially. I had the money. My promotions and careful saving had left us with a healthy emergency fund, but this went beyond dollars and cents. "If I help them without addressing the real issues, nothing will change," I said. "They'll take the money, save their house, and go back to the same patterns." "So, set conditions," Rachel suggested. "Make the loan contingent on family counseling or regular conversations about the favoritism issues." "Do you think they'd actually change after all these years?" Rachel reached for my hand. "I don't know. But I do know that you'll never forgive yourself if you don't at least try to help them. Not because they deserve it, but because of who you are." The next day I called Aunt Linda for her perspective. "They're really in trouble, Brandon," she confirmed. "Robert has aged 10 years in the last 6 months. They're selling furniture and antiques just to keep up with bills." "What about Jessica? Is she helping at all?" Linda's tone hardened. "Jessica is too busy playing victim. She blames Nathan for everything and expects your parents to continue supporting her despite their circumstances." That information helped me make my decision. The following weekend, I invited my parents back to our home, this time with a proposal of my own. My parents arrived punctually, looking even more stressed than before. As we sat in our living room, Michael playing at a friend's house to give us privacy, I presented the terms I had carefully considered. "I'm willing to help," I began, "but I have conditions." My father nodded eagerly. "Anything, Brandon. We're desperate." "First, I'll provide enough money to stop the foreclosure temporarily, but not as a gift. It's a formal loan with a written agreement and repayment terms." Of course, my mother agreed quickly. "Second, you need to sell the house and downsize significantly. I'll help with the difference between what you owe and what you can sell it for, but you need to live within your means going forward." They nodded, though I could see my mother's pain at the thought of leaving her home of 30 years. Third, and this is non-negotiable, we start family counseling, all of us, including Jessica. This caused visible discomfort. Counseling, my father repeated. "I don't see how that's necessary for a financial issue." "This isn't just a financial issue," I said firmly. "This is about a lifetime of patterns that need to be addressed if we're going to have any relationship moving forward." "Brandon," my mother began, her tone taking on that familiar, dismissive quality. "No," I interrupted. "This is the condition that matters most to me. We need neutral professional help to work through the favoritism, the unfair treatment, and the betrayal. Without that, any financial help is just enabling more dysfunction." My parents were silent for a long moment. Finally, my father spoke. "We'll do it. All of it. Including getting Jessica to participate in counseling," I pressed. "We'll convince her," my mother promised, though she looked uncertain. "One last thing," I added. "I want a formal acknowledgement in writing of what happened with the wedding fund. Not just that it was a mistake, but the specific details of what was taken from me and why it was wrong." My request clearly made them uncomfortable, but after exchanging glances they agreed. Over the next few weeks we put the plan into action. I worked with a lawyer to draft a loan agreement with reasonable terms. My parents listed their house and found a small 2-bedroom condo they could afford with the proceeds from the sale and a small mortgage. The written acknowledgement was the most difficult part for them. My father sent 3 drafts that minimized or justified their actions before finally producing a straightforward account that read, "We, Robert and Diane Wilson, acknowledge that we withdrew approximately $25,000 from an account specifically designated for Brandon's future wedding expenses. We gave this money to Jessica for her wedding without discussing it with Brandon first. This action was unfair and a betrayal of trust. We deeply regret the hurt this caused and are committed to making amends both financially and emotionally." Seeing those words in black and white provided a validation I hadn't realized I still needed. For the first time, my parents had put in writing what they had done wrong without excuses or deflections. Getting Jessica to agree to family counseling proved challenging. She initially refused, claiming she had nothing to do with the financial situation. It took my parents threatening to cut off the support they were still providing for her to reluctantly agree. Our first counseling session was tense and uncomfortable. Jessica arrived late. My parents were defensive, and I found myself struggling to articulate decades of hurt in a constructive way. The therapist, Dr. Meredith Collins, skillfully guided the conversation toward specific incidents rather than general accusations. "Brandon, can you share a specific memory that illustrates the favoritism you experienced?" she asked. I described the Christmas when I was 14 receiving practical gifts, while Jessica got expensive electronics and concert tickets. "That's such a stupid example," Jessica scoffed. "You liked practical things. You were always so serious." "Jessica, try to listen without responding right away," Dr. Collins suggested. "How do you think Brandon felt in that moment?" "I don't know. Normal. It was just Christmas." "Invisible," I corrected. I felt invisible, and I didn't like practical things more than fun things. I just learned not to ask for what I wouldn't receive. That first session ended with little apparent progress, but as we continued meeting monthly, small breakthroughs began to occur. My mother tearfully acknowledged in our third session that she had always found it easier to connect with Jessica because they were more alike, while my father admitted that he had higher expectations for me because I seemed more capable. "But don't you see," I asked them, "by treating us differently, you created those very differences. Jessica never had to be responsible because you handled everything for her. I had to be responsible because no one was going to rescue me." 6 months into our counseling journey, Jessica had a moment of genuine insight. After Dr. Collins asked her to imagine how she would feel if her future children were treated as differently as we had been, something seemed to click. "I would never do that to my kids," she said then, paused, looking surprised at her own words. I guess Mom and Dad did do that to us, didn't they?" It was a small acknowledgement, but a significant one. For the first time, Jessica seemed to see beyond her own perspective. My parents sold their house and moved into the condo, adjusting to a simpler lifestyle. They stuck to the repayment plan for my loan, sending monthly checks that always arrived on time. These consistent payments represented more than money. They symbolized a commitment to respecting boundaries and keeping promises. Gradually, we began rebuilding a cautious relationship. My parents visited our home for dinner, occasionally getting to know their grandson, Michael. These visits were initially awkward but became more natural over time. I noticed my father making a conscious effort to ask about my work and interests, while my mother took genuine delight in Michael without comparing him to other children. A year after they had shown up on our doorstep, desperate for help, we celebrated Michael's 3rd birthday with a small family gathering. As I watched my parents singing Happy Birthday with genuine joy, I realized how much had changed. "They're really trying," Rachel observed as we cleaned up after the party. "They are," I agreed. "It's not perfect, but it's progress." Jessica's journey was more complicated. Her marriage to Nathan ended in divorce, and she moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, working full-time for the first time in her adult life. Initially, she blamed everyone but herself for her circumstances, but over time, with continued therapy, she began to develop insight and accountability. "I never learned how to stand on my own," she admitted during a rare moment of vulnerability when we met for coffee. "Mom and Dad always fixed everything for me. I never had to face consequences." "It's not too late to learn," I told her. "I think that's what growing up actually means." Our relationship remained delicate, but we were at least able to be in the same room without tension. When Jessica met a new man, a teacher named David, who was kind but firmly grounded, I noticed how different her approach to the relationship was. She paid her own way, discussed future plans realistically, and seemed to value substance over flash. The most profound changes, however, were within myself. The process of setting boundaries, requiring accountability, and gradually reopening the door to relationship had given me a sense of agency I'd never fully experienced before. I was no longer the passive recipient of unfair treatment. I was actively shaping the terms of our family dynamic. When Rachel became pregnant with our 2nd child, I felt none of the anxiety I had experienced the first time about patterns repeating. I knew now that cycles could be broken, that awareness and intention could create new patterns. At a family dinner celebrating the news of our coming baby, my father raised his glass for a toast. To Brandon and Rachel, he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Thank you for giving us a second chance we didn't deserve. The strength and integrity you've shown have taught us what real family means." It wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced, and we continued to need our monthly sessions with Dr. Collins to navigate difficult moments. But slowly, steadily, we were building something new from the ruins of what had been broken. As I look back on this journey, I realized that cutting my parents off wasn't the end I had imagined it to be. It was a necessary pause, a boundary that created space for genuine change. True family isn't about unconditional tolerance of mistreatment. It's about creating conditions where respect and love can flourish. My story isn't about perfect resolution or fairy tale endings. It's about the messy, ongoing work of healing family wounds and the courage to demand better while remaining open to growth both in others and in ourselves. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who hurt you? How did you balance self-protection with the possibility of reconciliation? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself doesn't mean giving up on family forever. Sometimes it's the only way to build a healthier family in the end. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself and those you love.